Hey guys, what's going on today? We're sitting down with Tim Novak. Tim is our head engine builder here at Browns Performance. Today we wanted to sit down and kind of talk about basically Tim's background and where he comes from and all the stuff that he's done in his past to kind of give you guys an idea of what he brings to the table when he's putting together a short block or a long block for you. So Tim, let's start with where you started and about how long ago was it? I mean, I know it was back in your teens you started working at a parts store, right?
Yeah, I was 16. Can't remember the year, but started in the machine shop business at a auto parts store that had a machine shop in the back. How it all started, living in Dayton, Ohio. I was going to a co-op school.
Okay.
And I took auto mechanics. And the way the school worked, they would take like top 8 students of the class and they would find you a local spot at the local businesses, and you would work 2 weeks. So you got on the job training, paid in credits, and then the other 2 weeks you would actually work, at school, doing homework and taking regular classes. Well, I ended up number 8. And everybody else had got a job except me, and teacher come up to me, he said, we got you something, but it's not, in a garage. And I was like, well, that's what I'm taking schooling for. And ended up, he said, well, it's at a machine shop, at an auto parts store, and that's the best we could do for right now. So I ended up taking that, and that's where I kind of got pushed into the automotive machine world. And so I started doing that, and I was the tear down guy and clean guy, and then I graduated to grinding some valves and stuff. But that's kind of how I got my start into all of this.
So in the beginning, you were just the guy who tore down.
I was the tear down bitch, as they call it.
Oh boy.
I did all the nasty, dirty work, cleaning the hot tanks out, and scraping all the carbon and blasting stuff. But I gotta start somewhere,
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit to like when you started, getting into the performance realm and wanting to race a car, and how did all that come about?
Oh, well, my Uncle George, he's the one that kind of got me into the performance stuff, and that's what led me to taking the auto mechanics class, and which, led me on to other things. But I came back to PA because the auto parts store gig was in Dayton, Ohio. I came back to Pennsylvania and stuff. I had a little bit of experience and a good, he's actually my best friend, Vince Calabrese. Him and a guy that he used to work with, they bought a machine shop from an old gentleman that was retiring.
Okay.
So they were busy, and Vince says, hey, he said, I know you're not working. And he said, we're busy. You want to come to the shop and help out? And I said, well, yeah, because I needed a job. And and from when I started there, obviously it was tear down and cleaning, but Vince, took me under his wing, and he's the one that taught me about, doing cylinder heads the proper way.
Which is exactly what you like to do. That's your call to fame.
That's my thing,
heads.
is cylinder heads. I do the other stuff because I learned to do it, and I can do it, and I get paid for it, but my thing is cylinder heads. But I learned a lot off Vince. Vince is a really good cylinder head guy, and back in those days, what I was taught, like today, the machines, you buy them, they have cutters for 3 angles, 5 angles, 7 angles, radiuses. Back in the day, we didn't have all that, so you had to learn to cut each individual angle separately, and that separates a lot of men from the boys.
Yeah, it makes sense.
How to, make the seat the right width, to locate it on the valve and stuff, where these new machines, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, it does a lot of it for you.
I'm glad I went through that phase. I feel that has helped me be, better as far as, valve jobs and stuff, the proper way. And
yeah, I mean, if a machine won't do it for you, you have to learn the skill yourself.
And Vince was good. He taught me, a lot of stuff. And like I said, I just took it from there and just kept trying to improve. But there was times, we weren't busy with cylinder heads. Vince's partner, Larry bored all the blocks, honed all the blocks, ground cranks, polished the cranks, resized the connecting rods, line board. Larry did all that. And so when like he was busy, he was by himself.
Okay.
He's, come to me one day at lunchtime. We were sitting there, and he said, "You want to learn how to do something else?" And Vince said, "Yeah, get him doing something else if you want." So Larry taught me how to bore blocks and hone blocks, and then I learned how to do connecting rods, resize connecting rods and stuff, and then showed me some engine assembly, and it got to the point I was doing all the engine assembly except like the industrial and farm stuff.
Okay.
I didn't want to do that shit anyhow, but I wanted to do small block Chevy, small block Ford, stuff like that.
So you learned a lot of the stuff from two guys to start with.
Yeah, that's what really got the ball rolling for me. Then years later, I was fortunate. I've worked at a lot of different shops over the years and stuff. Another big milestone for me is I ended up working in a shop called Street and Strip Shop. I had got laid off from another job. Bob had a shop. His shop was known in the area. His specialty was Mopars. Big performance shop. They did. We didn't do a ton of motors there, but it was all basically all drag race oriented stuff. And I remember I got left go on a Thursday. Friday night, we were down at the drag strip, for racing on Friday night. Bob happened to be down there testing with his car, and I had made a pass, and I was coming up the return road, and I beeped the horn at him, and he motioned for me to come back. So we went down to his pit area, and we started talking. He said, "Heard you're out of a job." I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "Well, I'd like for you to come work for me." So we kind of talked a little bit, and I said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "Be there Monday." So Monday I started Street and Strip Shop, and Bob said, "Well," he said, "I really wanted you." He said, "I know you can do a lot of different things, but I've seen your cylinder head work." He said, "It's good." He said, "I can make you better." And he said, "Plus you do carburetors." He said, "Nobody here wants to do carburetors except him." And I used to do a lot of Holly and Rochester carburetors back in the day. I mean, we were doing stuff modifying the Hollies way before a lot of the companies where you could just buy the carburetor with all those mods done. We were doing them separate.
Yeah, a lot more man's hands involved.
Yeah, because they weren't quite as advanced as the stuff has gotten over the years. And I started there with Bob, and it was cool because Bob had a flow bench. And working with Bob and stuff, he was able to help me reach a next level as far as port work and stuff. And Saturdays and Sundays, when the shop was closed, I would go there and spend a day with Bob out in the shop, and we'd play around on a flow bench. And I got to learn stuff. Bob would never tell you what to do. He wanted you to think. So
Figure it out.
He would throw some subtle hints out and see if you would pick up on it. And most of the time I did. Sometimes I failed, but we'd grind an area, stuff it back on the flow bench, and see if it improved or if it didn't. But I learned a lot off Bob as far as the porting and stuff.
Yeah, he kind of helped hone your skills because that flow bench took the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you a good idea. I mean, this is back in the day too, where you didn't have all these castings that you could buy. We were still, this was old school cast iron stuff, and Bob was noted for his cylinder heads. Like I said, he was a Mopar specialist. We would take 440 Chryslers and 906 castings. We'd have Joe, one of the other kids that worked there, he did most of the chassis work, for cars. And Joe was a good welder, and we would weld these heads up, like the intake ports and stuff. We just grind and grind and grind. And Bob had a dummy motor or short block assembly. We kind of set the heads on there, and then you have to go through and re-clearance, for like push rods and stuff. But I mean, the work, back then, now you can buy that stuff.
You don't have to do all that work to get there.
Yeah, but it was cool. A lot of neat stuff to learn, and just having the experience of doing it. Versus like today, you can buy the stuff.
Yeah, you start so much further ahead of the curve versus back then. There wasn't a whole lot of people trying to make big power. So
no, I remember first time me and another guy that I used to work for, we went to a PRI show. And there again, I'm getting older, my memory isn't great. I can't remember what year, but it was last year. It was in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Really?
And so me and Bink went there and spent the day. And for me, a big thing at PRI is going to the equipment section. You know, what's the newest and greatest and stuff. And I remember seeing my first CNC porting being done. And, you know, I was just like, holy shit. And I can remember my boss, Bink, I was standing there and I was just, you know, in awe.
Now, after all that you've worked through, you're working on Subarus. So all this V8 stuff you started with, like how did you wind up putting these guys together?
I took a little bit of a break for a while. As far as working at a shop, I was still doing cylinder heads at home and some motor assembly and needed to make some money to get the bills paid. I went to some of the old shops I used to work at and they weren't quite busy enough to bring somebody in. And my good friend Vince that I used to work for, he, you know, in the meantime, down at Pittsburgh Crank, he ended up taking a sales position up in the warehouse to sell parts. So he knows a lot what's going on. He said, hey, he says, this is back in PA. He said, there's a shop in Indiana. He says, you know, they're looking for somebody, you know, why don't you give them a call, you know, and set something up. And I said, no, okay. I said, whose shop is it? And I figured it was maybe somebody I knew
Yeah.
or, you know, had heard of. And he said, it's called Slowboy Racing. I said, Slowboy Racing, what kind of name is that? You know, and he said, well, here's the thing. He says, they do import stuff. And I'm like, oh. And I was like, I don't know about this because I'm a die-hard V8 guy, you know, and, you know, I always made fun of this crap, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
right? You know, but I needed a job, so I called up and I talked to their shop foreman. And he said, yeah, he said, stop up and we'll have an interview. And so I drove up and, you know, was looking around, talking to him, and it was kind of funny because their lead machinist, that guy used to work for a shop that I used to work for at one time. So it was like, oh, you know, oh, you worked at Tommy's, you know, da-da-da. And so I took the job. I started porting cylinder heads. Then, you know, some other things came up, and Josh was working on some Subaru stuff, and you know, I said, what are you doing? I had never seen one of those motors out of a car.
Yeah.
Tore apart. And he's telling me, and he said, oh, give me a hand. So I kind of helped him, and he was explaining stuff. But that was, you know, my first experience with this, you know, import stuff, you know, was the Mitsubishis. And, you know, we were just starting to get into Subarus at Slowboy at the time. And, you know, that's how I ended up getting involved in this. When Slowboy made the move down to Florida, me and my family were the only ones that came, and so I got kind of pushed into
building engines.
Yeah, you know, I mean, so I was doing cylinder heads and doing the motor builds and, you know, machine work and everything, and the Subarus were starting to get a little more popular, and we were selling more, and, you know, we got to the point we were actually doing more of those than we were doing, you know, with 6-bolt, 7-bolt Mitzi motors, you know, and so that's how I got involved in all this.
So for all you guys who don't know who Slowboy Racing is, if you were into these cars back in 04, 05, 06, 07, Slowboy Racing was among two of the big entities when it came to turbocharged cars. It was Slowboy Racing and Extreme PSI. And if you were trying to build a DSM or a Subaru, those were basically the two companies that you bought from. And when I heard Timmy talking about Slowboy, it was one of those things that brought back memories because, believe it or not, I started going back through my email and I had quotes from 2006, 2007 from those guys on building me a short block. It was definitely like it triggered kind of like an instant level of trust, because going back that far, if you've been doing this that long, you're either really good at it or you're really bad at it, one of the two. Obviously, Tim, he's damn good. You know, we've built quite a few engines. I mean, some of my cars, you know, the company vehicles have been just brutally beat on. And the engines are the things that tend to always last. We tend to be breaking everything else in the drivetrain. But as far as these engines, the short blocks, the long blocks, we haven't had a single issue out of any of them. Hats off to Tim, because some of the things that I've done to some of these cars, they don't live to tell a tale most times. And I've gotten away with it more than once. So after you left Slowboy, what was the next step? I know you were there for a while, but now you're here in Florida. You wind up at Revworks next? Is that how it happened?
Well, I worked at a shop I really don't want to say the name of for a couple years. That was kind of a dead end thing, but that's where I had met Scott. I just happened to stop by just see how Scott in his new location they were doing, and one thing led to another. He said, "Hey, if you start feeling better," he said, "I get some motors, you can put together." And so me and Andy, because we were both out of a job, we were going over there, and it was just like a part-time gig, porting some heads, assembling some motors, and then next thing you know, it just started taking off. A lot of it I'll give credit to Marty Ruiz, that was kind of like, I guess, a general manager at the time. Marty knows how to do the whole social media thing and everything, and we ended up getting a build from a customer up in Oklahoma, which turned, it was pretty nice setup. I mean, the guys shipped a car down, they got a suspension, brakes, all kinds of crap. We built a motor for it. If I remember correctly, it made like 770, 780. I'm trying to remember who did the video.
Mike Brenes.
Michael Brenes did the video. It was posted on YouTube, and next thing you know, the phones were ringing off the hook. They were calling and asking they want a game over package, which there really wasn't a package. It was, you know what I mean?
It was just a car that you guys put together.
Yeah, and then
It just caught fire, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was like nonsense. We just started getting busier and busier, and then we did it was a newer Smurf Blue STI for a guy, Kevin Palmer. He lives down, I think, Tampa way. We did that. That was a nice build, clean, but same thing, wheels, tires, suspension.
So that car wound up making quite a bit of power as well.
It was a little bit more, but it was a real clean build. And there again, Michael Brands did a video, and that just helped push it even further. So, I mean, we went from, when I started at Revworks, like the first year, well, it wasn't even a full year when me and Andy were there. We did like 39 short blocks, long blocks. Then the following year it was 60. And then, after all that whole game over thing, I mean, it got to the point we were doing, 90 to 100 short blocks a year.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So it got pretty big.
Yeah, so that's a lot of short blocks to be slinging in a year. That's about 2 a week.
Yeah, I think it was 15 and 16. Those 2 years we were doing we did like 100
a year.
Yeah.
Wow. So
that's a lot for just me and my son to
yeah,
do, so
and
we were busy.
For anybody who's listening, anytime I say Tim and Andy are a package. There is no Tim without Andy. There's no Andy without Tim when it comes to putting these engines together. They work together. We don't take anything from any one of these guys. When they're doing something, if you guys could watch them work, which will give you a small insight to that, their attention to detail is par none. Like you're not having an assembly line of guys put these engines together for you. These engines that leave us are put together by these two individuals. Everything from the first bolt that goes into the oil pump to the last bolt that goes into the valve cover, they're done by these two guys, and they're constantly checking behind each other to make sure that the product that leaves this building is at 100% customer satisfactory. So if you are buying a short block from us, or you're looking to buy a short block from us, you just know that this isn't an assembly line of guys putting these things together. They're making sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed.
And talking about like Andy and stuff, he's been with me since right out of high school doing this stuff, and he's my right hand man. He's my muscle. Watching him progress, from not knowing nothing to now this kid can put a short block together, or a long block,
yeah.
So it's cool. I enjoy, and it's cool getting to work with your kid, Yeah,
I mean, like you said, you get to see him. Basically, you saw him grow up from being a child, and now you're seeing him cross the threshold from being a kid graduating high school to being a man who can handle putting something together that can handle 800 to 1,000 horsepower. Building a Subaru short block is one thing. Asking for 200 horsepower per cylinder out of it is a whole different animal, right?
Yeah, that's a lot out of these. I'm pretty happy with the progression we've been able to do over the years. I mean, it was at Revworks when we took on this drag racing thing, you know what I mean? It was a lot of trial and error because, anybody was making big power, you weren't you weren't getting any help. You were kind of on your own. So, it was a lot of R&D, trying to figure things out, Now, kind of have a recipe, of knowing what to do and obviously good parts. I feel a lot more comfortable now than back then because, we had nothing, there was no guidelines to go off of, You can't find a book and open it up like, okay, for this horsepower, do this, for this horsepower, you know what I mean?
No, you have to figure that all out.
Yeah, and it took a while, but luckily everybody was patient enough and really wanting to do it that we finally come up with the right recipe for it, and so and it's worked. So
Yeah, I tell you firsthand it works. So as far as like next, you built some pretty strong short blocks, you built some pretty, badass long blocks. Now we're talking about like having a CNC program for a cylinder head that you designed. How'd that feel?
that was pretty cool. Never had that before.
Well, if you think about it, right, like from the first time you went to PRI and you saw a CNC machine, now we're talking about a time where we got this machine that you were Google-eyed over, basically,
Yeah.
doing something that you created.
Getting the CNC programs done did help speed things up. And I'm not gonna lie, you get older, and like I said, arthritis, the forearms from standing, people that don't actually, today with the CNC machines, if there's a program in it, you put the head in, hit the button, and the machine does the whole deal. Back in the day, we didn't have that. So when you ported a set of heads, you were at the die grinder for a while. So, you got this thing, buzzing in your ear, and
Oh yeah, it's manual labor, and it's a different type of manual labor where you're 100% focused for the entire time that you're on that thing.
no, you have to be. If one of the things I had seen a lot over the years with porting is, one, everybody has this big misconception that you take this hole and make it this big, and which is wrong. And being consistent when you're doing that, you know what I mean? I've seen guys that did their own port work on stuff, and want me to take a look at it. And you want to be as consistent as you can on the
No,
sizing.
you can't have this
No.
this intake runner getting more air than this one.
And it was usually, okay, we started out real good, and oh, this sucks, I can't wait to get it done. So this one over here, not close to this, or somebody started off slow and progressively, got their shit all pumped up. Oh, I got this. And, the end one, the last one they did, towards the end was the better. But
So consistency, and that's the big deal.
yeah, that's a big deal on cylinder heads.
Without Tim, there's not enough of me to go around to do all this. I've learned a lot from this man on engines and what to look for when you're tearing one down. But I am not him. I don't know what he knows. You just heard it's been 1981 was when his beginning of going to an actual shop from the place that he started at. So he's been doing this longer than I've been alive, if that gives you any reference.
Yeah, it's 40-some years. I've learned a few things over the years.
Yeah, and the thing I like about working with Tim, I can ask him just about anything and I'll get a straight answer. There's never any rigmarole, any beating around the bush. He wants whatever he sends out of here to be perfect. And nowadays that's getting kind of hard to find, somebody who takes that much pride in their work. So if you guys ever take a chance and buy a short block from Browns, this is the guy that'll be putting it together. And just know he ain't gonna, it doesn't matter if it's Monday or Friday, you're gonna get the same quality work.
No, I've always been like that. Even if I'm having a bad day, I still will give 100%. You know what I mean? I'm not one where, yeah, this will work. We can get away with that. I don't do that. That's one of the things I enjoy working with you. You kind of okay, this is what we want to do. We have a real good recipe now for, parts wise and everything. And when I do come across an issue, I call you up and hey, and right away you're okay, hold, stop. We get something else, to, whether it be another head, another block, another set of rods, you know what I mean? So, that makes me feel good too, that, okay, this guy wants to do it right. So, all right, there's an issue here, push it to side. Let's fix it with this.
Yeah, I've been the customer more than once. I know what it's like to be on that side of the table, you know, where like you're trusting somebody with a bunch of money that you've worked hard for. If you don't get what you're paying for or it doesn't work out, they don't really have time for you. And that's not me. You know, like I'm the type of guy, like if something doesn't go right, let's figure out why it didn't go right and then we'll deal with it accordingly. We like to put out a product that, you know, at any given time, you know, we can use in one of our cars or one of your cars. Like there's no quality change between an engine that's going in one of our drag cars versus an engine that's going in your drag car. If you're looking for someone or a company that cares about the product they're putting out into the world, whether you be in Florida or California, I think we're the place to choose. Short blocks with these cars is not an easy game. You know, our work speaks for itself. And if you want to give us a shot, go ahead. So that ends our talk with Tim today. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and we'll see you next time.